Great, thanks very much, Rosalie, for hosting this afternoon's discussion, and thanks very much, Sophie, for making this amazing book with Ghost, The Death of the Beautiful Subject, which I guess some of you will have got already and read and some of you won't have. And it's a remarkable book which features photographs taken by Sophie's father, email correspondence with him, but without Sophie's own emails. And Sophie has treated the photographs of butterflies in the book in a way that we're going to see in a moment, and she's going to tell us a little bit about. And then at the end of the book, there's an absolutely extraordinary bit of writing that Sophie has constructed, which brings together observation, autobiography, aspects of family life, memory, some reflections on what it means to look. A whole lot of things joined together. It isn't like anything that I'd read before. And it makes together an absolutely riveting publication. So I hope everyone has the opportunity to buy the book later on. So before having a discussion around the themes of the book, Sophie's going to tell us a bit more about it and show us a few images of earlier work, so we have a sense of how the project is situated in terms of her own trajectory in her practice. Sophie.
Okay. Shall I start with this project?
Yeah.
It was sort of on the back of previous, the piece I was working on before, which was called Objects in the Field, where I'd been, it was a residency I'd been doing in Cambridge at the Institute of Astronomy, and I'd been, maybe I'll flip back to just here. When I arrived at Cambridge, it was the Institute of Astronomy. When I arrived there, I encountered this scientist here, Dr. Willstrop, and he was responsible for making this telescope, the 3-mirror telescope. And there was a whole sort of, there was 125 negatives, which I'd begun to, after a sort of long dialogue with him, print myself and sort of subject to my own kind of aesthetic considerations. So this project was sort of developing, and alongside it, a dialogue with the scientist himself. And during that time, my uncle happened to be working at the Institute of Astronomy, and I was spending a lot more time with him because he lives in America, and started at the time. I mean, this is all sort of part of the backstory, but I had a terrible relationship with my dad and wasn't really speaking to him properly, and so I started sort of understanding more about my dad through my uncle. And at some point during this time, he mentioned that my dad had been photographing butterflies, and I really sort of like pricked my interest, and I thought that, something about that made me want to encourage me to get back in touch with him. And so I started asking him to send me these pictures. So he was really sort of pleased, and it just over this. So it started in 2011, and he's just started sending them to me. I guess season by season. So there's a big flurry of them would come through around this time of year actually, and then there would be nothing, and then again it would kind of come back again the following season. Over the years, so it's maybe 3 years that I was doing this, building up this collection of butterflies that he made, not really knowing what to do with them. So these are some of the originals here, very kind of unremarkable, but I just sort of begun to think, how can I kind of like, in the way that I was making Roderick Willstrop's astronomy negatives mine in some way, how can I make this work mine? It felt very important to sort of, for all different reasons, to sort of take it away from him and sort of reconfigure it in my kind of orbit. So quite sort of subtle, a kind of deviation, I suppose, from the original. I gave it a new sort of aspect ratio. I cropped it, pulled out the colour. So in many of the cases you don't see the butterfly anymore. So it seemed to be this kind of dialogue which was happening literally with me and my dad, but then also a sort of symbolic one where I was taking his images, which were all about subject, and denying him the subject. So that's basically what the project is. It's 24 images of each of a different kind of butterfly, all made by my dad and then retouched by me. So yeah, and then as you say, with this text at the back that sort of references other themes, which I guess to do with memory and the natural world, but I think most importantly it's to do with the kind of like the sort of tussle over subject, like the sort of the kind of deferral of subject. There's a few more. There's 24 altogether.
Are you going to show a few more, or should we?
I don't know. Start. Yeah. Oh yeah, and then these ones. These are sort of like these. There's one of these at the beginning and one at the end where they sort of. This is about the physical removal of the subject, and it seems to kind of illustrate just in a very kind of simple language what's happened. But so the removal becomes this kind of very dominant sort of device that sort of describes lots of different parts of my strategy.
When you say what's happened,
oh yeah,
it's a bit more complex, isn't it, as you describe in the book?
You mean what's happened to the pictures?
What was happening in the family life?
Oh yeah. So yeah, shall I talk about that?
Why not?
Okay. The reason that I had this terrible sort of like kind of non-dialogue really was that about 10 years earlier that my dad had left my mum for another woman, and so it caused this big kind of rupture in our family life, which I'd sort of just, I don't know, kind of dealt with by completely shutting out Jill, my dad's wife, now wife. And and then and it was this process of the kind of, so it was just a little bit less than 10 years after it happened that I started collecting the butterfly pictures, but somehow through the process of collecting them I've begun to find a way of sort of reconciling, I don't know, through all different kinds of dialogue, but also through a dialogue which I initiated with her. But so it does feel sort of awkward talking about the that very sort of personal kind of autobiographical side of it. But somehow I needed it to be in there, just quite sort of. I needed to. It's a very sort of violent. It was a very kind of violent rupture in the family, but I needed it to sit there, but to be surrounded by all this other stuff, which was to do with photography and the material quality of images and what it's like to see and remember and the land and all these other things. So the separation sort of becomes part of this sort of landscape.
And the title of the book, The Death of a Beautiful Subject, there's obviously an ambiguity.
Yes, like what subject?
Yeah, what is or who is the subject?
Yeah, so it's a lot. It's the idealised family, and it's my sort of understanding of my dad and my mum and what they had and what we had, and then it's also, well, it's the butterfly obviously, and then there's something in the photograph as well. It's to do with the subject. It's to do with the kind of the sort of the displacement of the subject and the kind of tussle over where the subject resides, and then maybe it's something to do with landscape and youth and memory. I feel like and language as well in some way. So I feel like it's sort of everywhere. It's kind of deflected all around.
So, in terms of the way that you were able to re-establish a dialogue with your dad, it's through the transmission of photographs of something that interested him, and you've taken the photographs, you've framed. I think that the two images that we see here actually frame the series in the book. One is at the beginning, one's at the end. So the butterfly has actually been removed in terms of the materiality of its image. We see its outline, but in between you've done something very specific with the photos. How have you treated them?
They're desaturated. I made negatives of them and then made sort of very traditional black and white prints. In nearly all of his pictures, the butterfly is there as this sort of it has kind of central importance. So I recompose them so that the butterfly isn't always in the middle. So I sort of recompose them so as to make sense of the image as a composition. I think also another thing which I think you maybe get through the book, which you don't get through seeing them in a line on the wall, was my non-disclosure. So you have a sense of him complying with my requests or demands and then not disclosing the sort of my intentions. And that was a really important part of it. So it was as much...
You didn't know at all what you were going to do?
No, not at all, no. Well, I didn't know either until about a year and a half ago. So it was a long period of knowing I was going to do something but not knowing what, and knowing also it was important to sort of hold it back. But there was some sense of a kind of like regaining some kind of control, or I don't know. It did feel very much like kind of a sort of sense of taking something that didn't belong to me and using it.
Yeah. And isn't that
it's a kind
theme,
of, it's like punishment,
which we find also in your early work, because you're very preoccupied in the work previous to this with questions of light and illumination.
Oh yeah. I guess I feel like I'm not. It doesn't feel important as a sort of subject, more as a like a device, like a formal device for me. It's not. I'm not sort of interested in kind of transcendence or the kind of, I don't know, the kind of poetics of the nocturnal space. I'm not sort of interested in those. Maybe I'm a little bit more now, but certainly. Shall I just switch right back to?
Sure.
There's some of these very early works going back here that I think that you mean. Light definitely comes back as a theme. This one, this was from a long time ago, 98. I did a long series of. There was a series of 12, and all of them followed this format, and they were constructed in different ways. Some of them had a very strong sense of what the subject was, but it was really about the kind of the formal qualities, no sense of the nocturnal space as being sort of transgressive or kind of charged or anything like that. I wasn't really interested in that. It was much more about the sort of the functionality.
The functionality.
Of the darkness, and then light, and yeah. This was a film which was a sort of bar of lights that kind of started on the stage and then went up into the fly tower of an opera house. So it sort of happens I sort of discover lots of different ways of. Using light. Yeah.
But it's interesting with that project as well. You had the film of the dancer going into.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yes, that's right. Yes, yeah. The Afternoon of a Faun. Yeah. No, I know it does. It comes back as a theme as well. I'm not sure if it's so sort of evident now. This one here was the first time I used a sort of a man who had this kind of like a sense of a kind of agency or sense of kind of making something happen. He was the flyman in the tower who was pulling up the lights. So he was sort of this small movement here, and he did it with his eyes closed. It was responsible for this incredible movement of light all around the space. That was in 2007. So that was the first time that I let this kind of any kind of sort of sense of a kind of narrative feed into it.
It's interesting as well that in the work immediately prior to this one, the objects in the field, you're making a dialogue with the astronomer Willstrop.
Yeah.
And you're taking images that he's made through the telescope that he's built. which he hadn't invested as objects to be seen by
No.
other people. He'd kind of given up on them, even though the telescope was later built, I think, abroad by...
I think, yeah, but that was a different project, I think. Yeah.
But so those images weren't really destined for any other public.
No.
And yet you've appropriated them in your own way.
Yeah.
And then in this project, which immediately follows, you take images which focus on, something your dad was very interested in and focused on in all senses of the word, and then you've appropriated it.
Yeah.
In a kind of comparable way.
Yeah. Sort of like a kind of subjecting them to a certain sort of treatment, and then a kind of like return.
And what's being treated?
The image, but maybe is it? I don't know if it's also the sort of relationship between the dialogue. I feel like it's something that's being pushed back onto them. And I sort of I'm interested in the sort of in the ethics around that, like what it is kind of questionable. I think the ethics are questionable. But that seems interesting as a way of sort of really kind of like pushing it.
Your ethics or his ethics?
Mine. Yeah. Yeah, don't you think?
In not telling him what you're going to do with the images?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
But isn't that a kind of mirror image of your own earlier experience? Because Sophie's talked elsewhere, as a child, she was often photographed.
Yeah.
And there was a question for you, wasn't there, of what it means to be looked at, to be photographed?
Yeah, maybe. I think, I mean, I definitely felt that coming through much more strongly in this most recent thing. But I think in lots of them, there's been this very strong sort of pull towards. So this guy here as well, Ian, who was there on the riverbank when I was filming the Severn Bore, wrote me this letter which expresses a sense of regret at not having given me a hug, because he realised afterwards that our paths might not cross again. So in some ways this figure of this man has featured in lots of the previous work, but it's kind of weirdly that with Death of a Beautiful Subject that I realised that they were kind of representing maybe my dad, and there was a kind of that it wasn't just about. I'm interested in it not being about collaboration and not being about sort of consent. It's more of a kind of it's a little bit more antagonistic than that, and with each sort of party having their own agenda, and which isn't disclosed to the other, and then what I do with it, and so in some sense they become a kind of a cipher for something.
And that's something.
Yeah.
How could it? Can you say more about it?
I don't know. What do you think? I don't know.
But it's interesting also without sort of pushing more in terms of your own, autobiographical, the memories and things. Many of which you put in the book. I mean, they're not a secret.
No.
I mean, it's interesting the way that some contemporary artists are operating in that territory where the father is actually involved in the work. You think of Andy Holden, who does a lecture performance piece with his father, where his father, it's interesting, there's a similar naturalistic theme. He talks about birds, and Andy interrupts him with his own digressions and animadversions about birds. And here we have it with the butterflies, although in the performance piece, Andy's dad is aware of what's going on, and he's done it many times, so he knows more or less what's going to happen.
So it's a proper performance.
Yeah, it's a lecture they do together. Yeah. But here, you've taken the object of your father's gaze, in a sense, out of his, or away from his ownership.
Yeah. So that's that's right. That's the sort of that's what kind of underpinned the whole thing. Yeah.
Another question is very interesting. If you've read the book, you'll know that right at the very beginning, before we even have the shots where the butterfly image has been abstracted, there's a very savage passage which isn't annotated in any way. It's not, the reader doesn't really know where it's from, that describes a bird swooping and attacking.
Yeah.
It's a kind of predatory or violent gaze embodied in this bird that's swooping down. It's not explained.
No.
It kind of stands on its own. Can you say more?
Yeah, I wanted it to sort of set the tone for the whole book, really. So I think without it, it's a series of fairly sort of average pictures of butterflies, and I wanted to sort of establish a sense of that violence, but also of the importance of the image and of language and a sort of misunderstanding language. It tells the story of a bird swooping and plunging its open beak into the socket of someone's eye. It was actually my daughter's eye.
It's just a story, though.
Yes, it's just a story. And then it says, she wonders at the strength of the bird, the force of the blow, but more than that, she wonders at its intention. Would a bird ever do that? Swans in pictures always look so calm. So it's sort of, it tries to set something up where an image isn't really sort of representative of any kind of truth or reality or whatever. It's that there's a kind of, it's a picture of something, but it's a kind of, it's like a sort of glossy surface of something, and the real subject is always outside.
But it also sets up a disturbing tension for the subsequent viewing of the images in the book and the emails, because you have right at the beginning this idea of nature at its most violent and predatory, swooping down to suddenly attack you, and then you have these, what seems at some level that the anodyne images that your father had sent you, where he hasn't even killed the butterflies as he had, I think,
when they were kids,
as a child.
Yeah.
Now he's just producing delicate photographs, documenting them carefully, and you don't have any sense of that violence, but which is brought out very, very clearly in that passage. Just beneath the surface, you've got that as a potential.
Yeah, but I think in some sense maybe, I don't know if it comes through in the emails, a sense of him sort of cheerfully acquiescing to my kind of demands, and then by the time you get to the end, it's clear that I had all these intentions which weren't being disclosed, and the kind of violence in that, of a kind of the violence of non-disclosure,
which you both participate in different ways.
In different ways, yeah.
Another thing that I found fascinating about the book is the way that it illuminates the question of our relation to visual space. In the text at the back of the book, there are several instances where Sophie is describing moments of the first meeting with your dad's new wife. Haven't met her, you've heard about her. It's not exactly going to be an easy experience.
And it was 10 years after.
10 years later.
Yeah.
And then what you immediately focus on is the question of the clouds behind her that you can see through the window.
Yeah.
And earlier on as well, another of the encounters, you go immediately to the question of the visual space.
Yes. As a kind of as a kind of distraction. Yeah. I was sort of doing it in here as well with the lights.
But is it a distraction? Because I think with that last example, you think about the impossibility of the clouds. Can you find the passage? It's right. It's just it's off. Where was it? In the National Portrait Gallery?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Did you recognise it from the?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted it to sort of be real, like I didn't want it to be, the places to be too abstract.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's here. There must be some sort of coating on the window because the clouds don't look normal. They're slightly metallic, greenish with a hint of magenta. And it sort of goes on about how it doesn't seem technically possible. Yeah.
It doesn't seem technically possible that your dad could be with another woman.
No. No, that's right. Yeah.
So it is a fascinating thread that runs through this, the way in which, in a way, I mean, it's not a metaphor. It's a
No, it's not.
it's a displacement, but it's as if the same problematic, the same kind of question, is structuring your relation to the field, the visual field, and to the human relations within it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yes.
And another thing, which perhaps if you've read the book you'd have found enigmatic, is the so in that text at the end we hear a lot about Sophie's childhood and what's happened with the family, with your dad, and the meeting with your dad's new wife.
Yeah.
And then right at the end you talk about a moment during your residency at Dundee.
Yeah.
You're out on a beach.
Yeah.
You see a seal. By the time
yeah, that's right.
Describe what happened.
So yeah, well, shall I read this last bit? So I see this. I'm running along by the water's edge, and I see a seal, and it says, "I'm struck by the familiarity of her face, which I recognise from photographs. I try to get close, but she pulls herself away and slips back into the sea, and now she is gone. I go to where she was, and there in the damp sand is the unmistakable imprint of her magnificent body. I kneel down and touch the smooth folds of compressed sand, and they're still warm." Yes, I was interested in the connection with the sort of mother, the maternal woman, but even in the sort of physical absence, that the sort of warmth is retained, and the kind of the physical kind of imprint is still. There's a physical imprint here, and then there's this face in the water and so it ends on really sort of understanding the connection between them.
And in a way, it's also perhaps a description of the photos that frame the series, where you've just got the trace. Where Sophie's
the
taken
outline.
out the photo. You've just got the outline of the butterfly without the butterfly. And there was another intriguing passage here where you talk about the I don't know if you remember in the 70s the popularity of photo cubes. Are they still around today? People still
Not
have
really.
photo cubes.
They're digital now, aren't they?
Yeah. You know that they're like, it's a cube and you insert photographs into all the faces and you can rotate.
Yeah.
Say something about the.
Yeah. So there was so we had one of those photo cubes, and it really sort of fascinated me, and I would sort of turn it around in my hands and sort of realise that one of the images would always be sort of upside down and invisible, and you could never kind of like see it all at once. And then one day I was playing with it, and it sort of fell apart, and it was made of two. It wasn't a cube. It was made of two in sort of pieces of sort of plastic that slotted into each other, and all the photographs that were inside of our family fell to the ground, and there was this cardboard insert printed with pictures of another family.
The death of a beautiful subject.
Yeah. And they and who looked sort of happier than my family. And it was so sort of shocking, the sense of these kind of printed imposters sort of behind my, these pictures of us, me and my family. They really stayed with me, that sense of these people behind, but they were kind of more kind of like something more kind of official about them.
An officially happy family.
Yeah, they were officially happy. Yeah, and I sort of realised that we weren't.
And what was it like to then, when your dad had created his next home, to see photos of you?
Yeah, that's mentioned also. I never felt that. I still don't feel that I can look at them. So I sort of look away. It's like, but then if he goes to make a tea or something, then I sort of scrutinise them. But I can't. I feel like I can't look at them openly.
But it is your place in the picture. Does it feel different from how it would be?
I don't know if there's any of me. I think they're all of him and the new family. Yeah.
None of you.
I don't. Do you know? I haven't. I don't know. Actually, I don't know about that. I haven't noticed. That's one thing I haven't noticed.
Should we have some questions now, perhaps, Sophie, about the book?
Sorry.
Do you feel better for having done the work? Has it been a therapeutic sort of activity?
Yeah, the thing that really made me feel better was it was about halfway through. It was meeting Jill. So I always sort of had this really strong feeling that I needed to do something about it. I knew that even when it was happening, I knew that I wanted to do something about it, but I knew that it couldn't be just this kind of straightforward description. So it's not that doing it made me feel better, but having done it, I know that I am better. Do you know? Yeah, that it's a sort of having done it is a sign that I do feel better. Yes, I don't think it wasn't doing it. It wasn't the doing of it. It was the understanding that I was ready to that made me understand that I was feeling okay about it. And that meeting with Jill, I properly sort of like accepted and kind of I don't know, came to terms with it or whatever. And
And
it's good.
How was that situated in terms of the chronology? Was that after you'd started exchanging the images with your dad?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, it was about 2 years after I started. Yeah, I think I can't remember now. I think it wasn't that long ago. It was only, I think it was like 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. It's pretty recent still.
So do you think the work with the butterfly images in a way made that possible?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. But also another big moment was having written the text, then I had to show them both the text and sort of get their kind of approval or blessing. And that was another big moment. I think that was not last summer, the summer before, I think.
Did they give their approval?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. I think they were quite... Dad said that he thought that he got off quite lightly. I think he was expecting worse, but he hadn't seen the book at that point.
And how have they reacted to the book?
They're fine. I think they're fine. I don't think they're really fully. I don't know. They maybe don't sort of appreciate all of it, but I think generally they're okay. Yeah. I was just looking for a picture of the butterflies.
So his images are all quite well composed. The butterfly is always at the centre.
Yeah.
And then in the way that you've bleached them, you often find it takes a while to actually see the outline of the butterfly.
Yeah.
So you can't really see that what he had made central is somehow is become more elusive.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the reasons I'm interested in photography as well, as a kind of as something where the subject is kind of outside of the frame. So the idea that you would want to you sort of a picture of a butterfly is then about the butterflies, and that very kind of like direct relationship between the sort of subject and meaning in some sense is something that I'm really interested in, kind of resisting, you know. So as well as being about this relationship and autobiography and the details, I'm sort of interested in that as a kind of, I suppose, in relation to photography and process as well. So I'd like it to be that they're kind of happening together, that I'm exploring something very kind of technical about photography and subjecthood or whatever, and then also exploring this kind of very personal story.
With his photos, you can say that they're about, that's just to let the butterflies in. You can say his photos are about butterflies, and they are for him in the emails, but in your photos it's less clear if it's the same, it's got the same transitivity, whether they're about anything.
In mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the whole thing, they sort of contextualise. They sort of contextualise each other. So it's about this. It's about the kind of the relationship between all of them, and then his uncomprehending kind of willingness to go along with it, which you see through the text. So it's the way that the whole thing comes together. That I think image by image, as you say, that they don't really sort of read as anything very sort of special. But it's much more about the context and about I suppose about the performance of it as well, and And
can you say more about, outside this particular series, your thoughts on, let's say, aboutness in photography? The idea that, I mean, with both this and with the astronomy photos, you've taken something which is ostensibly about a subject, and then you've treated it, appropriated it in a different way.
Yeah.
So it's no longer, it doesn't have that direct sense of an aboutness.
No, it's sort of it's sort of contained by a sort of a visual and a conceptual language that is built up over a long time. So there's a sort of, it's about kind of authorship as well, I think. So that seems very important. The kind of the sort of sense of authorship and of the kind of subjectivity that builds up around a body of work that then can kind of begin to make its own sense. So in some ways, none of it makes sense on its own in isolation. The whole thing makes sense as part of this sort of dialogue of cross-referencing, and it's like a whole sort of landscape with certain features that all get kind of pressed into the same space. So that's where the meaning comes in some ways. It's to do with it's how the sort of the idea of something is kind of deflecting outwards, like away from the subject all the time, or away from the image, as much as sort of I don't know, contained by the frame.
Because it's interesting as well to thinking about that idea of containment by the frame of the image. If one kind of put in a series your 98 photos of a single isolated figure bathed in light in the middle of a field, and your dad's isolating of the one subject in the lens.
You mean it's a similar sort of way of working?
It's probably only similar at one level, and probably very similar at nearly all other levels. But it is interesting that I think right at the end of the series, Sophie uses a photo of her dad photographing a butterfly. So we actually see, rather than the butterfly that's been the object of all the photos, you see him in the process of
taking the picture. Yeah.
Have you got that?
I'll just get it. Yeah. It's the last one. Yeah. So it's sort of, it seemed very important that this would come as the really kind of like finally disclose the sort of structure or what's happened, like what the phrase again, what's happened, that they're all his pictures, and here we can see him in the act of making it, but it's a kind of weird, you don't really have any sense of where you are as a viewer, although I feel like in this picture we are quite present as viewers, sort of we're kind of behind the lens.
You've kind of flipped it as well, so he's in the place of the butterfly in the other images. He's at the back of the image.
That's right, yeah.
And in the place of our gaze, you have this very present, the butterfly that's as if on the screen between us and him.
And nearly it's concealing the camera as well.
Yeah. So it's perhaps evocative of a theme in your work, which is how different ways of embodying a gaze, which I think in your work you do through light and illumination.
Yeah.
Here maybe with a butterfly. Other questions?
Well, they're kind of two but connected. So the first one is, I'm interested in asking you why if you know the reasons why he was interested in photographing the butterflies. And then the second question is something you've kind of touched on, but you talk about it, the fact that when you rework the photographs, they become not necessarily about the butterfly anymore, but I sort of see them as works about the absence of the butterfly and other things as well. And so I was sort of thinking, what if it had been if it had been slugs or something? There seems to be some kind of holding on to the fact that this is a butterfly that you are describing or you're not describing in your works.
I think luckily it was butterflies. He's deaf. I don't know if I've mentioned that before. But he actually went deaf about 15 years ago. And he used to do bird watching, and then he couldn't do bird watching anymore because of he couldn't hear, and hearing is an important part of bird watching. So I think that's why he took up butterfly watching or butterfly photographing, and also he I suppose in some ways like me, he likes projects. So he does his own. He has all these different projects that he does. And he gets very sort of involved in them and taken up with them and makes notes. And it's like he's a sort of this just became one of the projects that he was able to do. He lives near Dartmoor, so it just kind of works practically. And I think also it was the BBC Nature Watch. We're doing that thing like cataloguing, so it's really up his street, cataloguing and counting and classifying. Identifying, he likes that kind of thing. I wonder if it would have been the same if it had been slugs. He sent me some pictures of spiders, but I thought in the end we'll stay with the butterfly theme.
There's something very fragile about the
butterfly. And that he used to catch them and kill them, and now he photographs them. So it just sort of made sense in all these different ways.
That's a question.
Talking about the butterfly in photographs, I assume that you have been taking photos of butterflies with your camera. So I wonder, how would you compare your own photograph of butterflies with...
No, I haven't been taking... No. None. No.
Even in daily life?
Oh. No, I don't think I have actually. No, I don't think so.
Have you taken photographs of your father?
No, I don't. No, I don't like taking photographs of him. Sarah,
I'm really interested that you said that your dad used to catch them and kill the butterflies, and that was replaced by photography.
Yeah.
And perhaps it's a bit obvious to think about photography as sort of capturing something. But I'm also thinking about how that has sort of somehow filtered down with your engagement with the photographs, your dad's photographs, that there's a real sort of fixity about them, which perhaps photography offers, but with the white, where you've taken the butterfly out, it becomes so present, but what you've kind of done is taken away the peculiarities of those butterflies, which your dad seems so interested in. And in a sense, it sort of sets up the kind of encounter with the book and the story and everything as a kind of go looking, like that you have to, throughout the book, you have to go looking for this thing that you're told is there, which you've erased. So there's both erasure and sort of fixity in work, which I think kind of really, although it's a very personal story, it kind of allows you to think of your own life, or just what kind of good writing's about. So it's not really a question.
No, I was thinking, oh God, there's going to be a question at the end of this.
Yeah, there's a question there.
Death of a Beautiful Subject. Very fine title. Did it come to you easily and obviously? Did you grow into it?
No, it was what was said by Mark Oliphant when they did the first nuclear test in the desert in Arizona. It was apparently and talking about either science and the study of the atom or the landscape as well, and the sort of, it was in the 1930s when they were developing the atom, how to split the atom. So apparently that's what was said as they were doing this first explosion. Yeah, so it's not original.
But it still retains an ambiguity, doesn't
Yes,
it?
it does, yes.
It indexes an act of massive destruction.
Yes, that's right. And experimentation. And the kind of romanticism as well, the kind of really sort of romantic kind of longing for the sort of purity of the subject, which is what they were interested in, and then how the kind of what the reality of these experiments was to go on to mean, which was the developing of the bomb.
So the death of the subject could mean physics itself.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and humanity, and the sort of physical landscape, and yes, and physics. Yeah, the physics, the experimentation physics. Then they achieved this thing, and that it was no longer theoretical, and the danger of it not being theoretical anymore, of it being sort of possible.
But you're kind of inverting that with the way you use the title. And as Sarah says, if there's a kind of common view of photography as a form of capture, which maybe is seen quite clearly in your dad's project of photographing and cataloguing. In a sense, you're doing the opposite of capturing.
Yeah, removing. Yeah. Sort of. It's a kind of denial, isn't it? It's a sort of denial of his both his collection and his labour, but also his sort of thesis about photography. Not that he has a thesis about. He doesn't have a conscious thesis about photography, but his unconscious thesis. It sort of. I don't know, denies that somehow.
So that would be another death of a beautiful subject.
Of his
theory of photography.
Yeah, his use of photography. Yeah, it's sort of saying, no, I'm going to use it in a different way.
Absolutely. Do we have time for? Maybe is there another question?
Yeah, you mentioned about. I think you said with photography, the subject is outside the frame.
Yeah.
So I just wondered what you meant by that.
Yeah. Well, I think that how it's sort of, you see a picture like that, and what you see is, I don't know, two butterflies mating or something. But in some sense, that's not what I'm interested in at all. I'm not interested in two butterflies mating. I'm interested in how in all this other sort of dialogue that we've been talking about, and the kind of symbolic exchange, and the removal, the redaction, and the kind of the sort of turning around of his intention, or the denial of his intention, and then all the other themes around sort of a kind of romantic sort of engagement with ideas of landscape, and what the natural world is, and so all of these other things are really the sort of subject of my work, but they're not really in the image.
So it's really what you're doing to the image to get to
that. I guess, and it's the process of building stuff up around it, and then how to reference it in a project, because you can't sort of easily communicate that just in one image, and for me that's not really a problem. So the image is just a sort of, in some sense, a little part of it, and it's about the dynamics and the kind of all the relations that sort of build up around it that become way more interesting than than the image. Like when the pictures fell out of my parents' photo cube, that weird kind of the upset of one thing being behind another, but that was sort of way more interesting than the pictures of us as kids somehow. Yeah.
But it's the exact inverted scene though that happens later, that just as when the photo cube fell or you took it apart, you suddenly see the image of another family behind your family. Later on, you describe that your dad had been on holiday with your mum in Rome, knowing that he was going to leave her to create a new family.
Yeah.
So again, you've got the screen of one family image and another behind it.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Horrific one.
And there's a moment of a sort of connection where I can imagine him in the heat, sort of with this knowledge, which has yet to be played out.
Should we stop the discussion on that bleak image? So thank you so much, Sophie, for a brilliant discussion.